This is Whitley Strieber. Today I'm talking to Tessa Dick. You may not know who Tessa is. She is the widow of Philip K. Dick, the renowned science fiction author with whom I have a number of strange sort of relationships, I would say. I never knew Mr. Dick during his lifetime. However, we share an obsession with ancient Rome. We share ideas about time and about the concept of parallel universes still unfolding in Mr. Dick's belief, or in his world, I should say. The Roman Empire had not really ended, and I don't exactly feel that, but I have such a close relationship with ancient Rome that I could easily understand where he's coming from. There's a lot in our work also that has a sort of parallel quality to it. And oddly enough, we share the same agent, Russell Galen, who was Philip Dick's agent, I believe is still the agent for his estate, and who is my agent. And so I'd like to welcome Tessa Dick to the program to talk about Philip Dick and his inner world. And if you don't know or wondering who Philip Dick is, well, it's a pretty easy question to answer. And those of you who know Philip Dick's work will know all of the books and so forth and so on. But for those of you who don't, his books were made into a number of rather famous films: Blade Runner, Scanner Darkly, Total Recall, Minority Report, Next, Paycheck, and there have been others as well. And so he's one of the great science fiction authors of all time. Welcome, Tessa, to the program.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to talk to you.
Well, thank you. Let's talk a little bit about your husband and his work, and especially I'm interested in talking about his beliefs about Rome, because mine are very similar, and it's odd that they would be, but they are.
Well, I've read very little about your views.
No, that doesn't matter. We're talking about your husband's.
Yeah. Well, I learned something from his high school buddy, Ray Nelson, that he had an experience of Rome long before I met him. And Ray Nelson says that Phil started talking in conversational Latin, and Phil did not know Latin.
How weird.
But Ray Nelson did. And it wasn't grammatically perfect, but it was flowing naturally. And Phil explained that he was experiencing himself as a gladiator in ancient Rome.
How interesting. So what he had was a kind of a parallel life experience taking place in ancient Rome.
Exactly.
Well, so do I.
And it did not seem to be a past life. It seemed to be two concurrent lives.
As if they were unfolding at the same time, but on sort of different timelines.
Exactly.
That's exactly what I have. It's precisely the same.
And I can tell you one really weird experience. We always walked to Trader Joe's to get groceries. Even after we had a car, we didn't like to drive. And we were walking down this alley and headed toward the store, and he kept seeing other people as dressed in Roman garb, and he saw the apartment windows as having iron bars that they were not there. I did not see any iron bars, but he thought that the people living in those apartments were really in a Roman prison.
In other words, now this is very different from my experience. He believed that this life was a kind of illusion that was unfolding in a Rome that was still around us.
Well, sometimes he believed that.
Sometimes, yes.
He did change his theories as new evidence came in. But, yes, he believed that somehow ancient Rome was more real than Fullerton of the 1970s.
Wow.
It's something like Plato's archetypes, that we're seeing the shadows on the wall of the cave and not the real objects that cast those shadows.
Right, exactly. And the real objects may be very different from what the shadows appear to be.
Exactly.
Yes, and maybe to some extent his mind was such that he saw this, and it's fascinating to me. Of course, when I go to Rome, I can take my wife through all of the nooks and crannies of the city, as long as the streets we were on are streets that were streets in the ancient city. But if I go into modern streets, I get lost immediately. And I don't even know how I do it. I just can. It's a fascinating idea in any case. Now, you were with him in the last, how long?
About 10 years.
The last 10 years of his life. And he struggled a lot in that time, as I recall. His creative struggle was very great, and his personal struggle as well.
Oh, yes. People used to say that he was burned out on drugs, but that was not the case. He was simply destroyed by life.
By life, and yet after his death, he has become such an icon. You think, it must be quite painful to you to see that in a way.
Well, I do wish that he could be here to enjoy it.
Of course. I know you must. And what was his work process like in the years that you were with him?
Well, basically, he would talk for days on end about what he was going to write. He didn't take notes or make outlines, but when he was ready, he would sit down and write the whole rough draft in about a week or two. He didn't sleep much when he was typing, but his writing process was more in the talking, and then when it was all done, then he would type it up.
It's interesting because in my writing process, it's thinking. I talk with my wife. We take long walks, and I talk with her, and I think, and I can put a whole book together in my mind and file it away and not write it for years. I've done that very often. Sometimes it'll be 5 years or 6 years before I actually write a book that I've had filed away. And when I start writing, every word is there, ready to go, and it just gets typed out very easily. Or not.
Or not.
Yeah. Well, so what of his books, which do you resonate the most with? Which ones feel the most extraordinary to you?
Well, the first one I ever read was Blade Runner. He gave it to me to read, and of course the title then was Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
Right.
So that kind of has to be my favorite because it was my first experience with his creative mind.
Same here. That was the first Philip K. Dick novel I read as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did learn later that I had read one of his short stories. I had read Roog several years before I met him, but I didn't remember the author's name.
Well, I read his short stories in the science fiction magazines, which I used to read religiously when I was a boy. And I always really looked forward to him. When I saw his name on the cover of something, I bought it instantly.
Wow.
So I knew, because he was, to me, I understood where he was coming from very well. I didn't know much about his life, and I certainly didn't know about his connection to ancient Rome at all. Did he have any sense of being a time traveler or anything like that?
Not him personally, but he did think that these strange people who visited him were time travelers.
Well, tell us about these people.
Okay, I never saw the really strange ones, but he saw people who he said resembled the famous bust of Nefertiti, Akhenaten's wife.
Oh, really?
Yes, they had large heads, large eyes, a small nose, and a very tiny chin, and just a slit for a mouth. But they were not like these gray aliens that people describe.
They were human looking.
Yes.
Well, you know, that's interesting because, of course, that type of figure is also quite common in the close encounter experience. People who, they call them hybrids, and they think that they are mixes between grays and human beings. What did he say about these visits? What were they like?
Well, he thought that these people were very timid because they seemed to be hiding in the corners, and they were shocked that he could see them.
That's also familiar. When they can be seen, it does shock people. I remember long before I had any awareness of any close encounter experiences, I saw one standing in the bedroom of my apartment in New York City in the in the mid 70s. Or maybe it was even, it was the mid 70s, like 1974, 75, somewhere there. And I thought, my God, vampires are real. And it was a very extraordinary and sinister, and this creature's face took on an expression of utter shock. And then it slowly kind of faded into a blur, and I couldn't see it anymore. And I didn't know whether it was a dream or what. And it became later the inspiration for the novel The Hunger.
Oh.
So did these creatures inspire him in any way, do you think?
Well, I know that they do play a role in his exegesis, which is a huge compilation of handwritten notes and typewritten essays about his experience. But he didn't write very much after the experience. He did write Valis and the Transmigration of Timothy Archer, but I don't remember them playing a role in those novels.
Yeah.
I think that, even though they didn't speak to him, he did say that he thought they were thinking to him.
Yes, that was certainly my impression.
Yes. Well, it was not like mind reading. It was not as if they could reach into your mind and see what you were thinking.
But they could communicate with you.
Yes, and if you directed your thought to them, they could understand. Exactly.
It's a very once you're connected with them, then there can be exchange. But unless your mind is connected with them, you can. And I felt a very strange sensation, and I've always thought to myself subsequently that one of the most enduring relationships in nature is the predator-prey relationship. And the prey never quite figures out the predator. Quite figures him out.
That's interesting.
Yes, and the prey is always able to be surprised by the predator. The predator is always a step ahead of the prey. On the African veldt, it's a short step, but a very crucial one. Because every time, if the lion lies down and pretends indifference, eventually the gazelles will give up worrying about him and drift too close.
Oh, wow.
I wonder if your husband drifted too close. If I have drifted too close, Tessa, I wonder about both of us.
Well, toward the end, I did try to warn him that he had come into contact with something that was not helpful to him, in fact, an enemy. But he didn't listen. And then he had his stroke.
What did you think this was? What form did it take, or what nature did it have?
Well, he said that it knocked him down and told him that it had created him and it could destroy him. And I thought it was lying.
Probably was.
It sounds like the devil to me.
A malignant force.
Well, I don't have a whole lot of religious background, but I think I know the devil when I see him.
So that's what you thought finally came to him, and yet he was a good man, a troubled and difficult man, God knows, but a good
Well,
man.
isn't that exactly who the devil would go after? He's already got bad people.
Yeah, well, that's very true. That's very true. Someone who might be vulnerable.
Yeah, and he and I both had the distinct impression that many of these visitors were protecting him from some evil force.
That there was a battle going on that he could perceive over his soul.
Yeah.
Wow, and you could perceive it too.
Well, here and there, I don't think I've ever seen an alien, but I have seen some either ghosts or demons or possibly these shadow people.
Uh-huh.
I've learned what to call them, but I've seen them since I was a small child and was just terrified and would run to my parents' bedroom. There's somebody in my room, and they'd tell me how silly I was. There's no one there.
And Phil, did he have these shadow people around him as well? I mean, in the same sense, because I see these beings rushing around and darting into cover all the time too, and I always thought that was sort of not real. I'm very skeptical, despite the bizarre life I've led, I guess.
Yeah, well, to some extent, I think Phil embellished his experience. He wanted to get more. And when it didn't come, he would make it up.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that I've never done. I've never cared to make it up. I try to unmake it if I think I'm making it up, in fact. And probably for that reason, I've gone in the opposite direction. I haven't said nearly enough about what happened to me. But I want to go back to those beings, and for an odd reason. He thought they were time travelers. And you know, at the I believe it's at in the temple at Abydos in Egypt, there is a rafter that contains hieroglyphics that look like modern military equipment, tanks and things.
Oh.
And I wonder if he might not have been right, and if they weren't perhaps time travelers who were able to project themselves somehow into the future, or had chosen that period as a base and actually were from the distant future. But that period was one of their bases in time. That's what I've always sensed somehow.
Well, could be.
And I wonder why they would come in particular to him. Because he could see them, do you think?
I think perhaps they didn't choose him. He just happened to be there at the right time or the wrong time.
Or he could see them.
Yeah.
Ah, what an interesting man. He left so many mysteries, Tessa. How do you live now, if I may ask?
Oh, I've got a little mountain cabin in Southern California, and too many cats and one dog. I like to garden, and I'm a member of our local Lioness Club. We're part of Lions International.
So you live a quiet life after having had this rather extraordinary 10 years with this man.
Well, I did hide out for a while. For a short time, people were constantly begging me for interviews, but I didn't want to talk to them. They had all these strange theories that they were not going to change based upon facts or evidence.
Right. Theories bore me, and so does ideology. I hate it.
Well,
what life gives is what is real, in my opinion.
I think the quest is more important than the goal.
Oh, yeah.
If you read about the Holy Grail, you find that only one, either Parsifal or Sir Galahad, will get the Grail, but the others gain a great deal on the journey.
Yes, exactly. He was on the journey to the Grail, in a way.
I think so. I prefer to do it by reading and studying rather than actually experiencing, because it's dangerous to have contact with these strange visitors. And I don't doubt that they're real, but I don't want to talk to them.
And he turned in that direction, and so did I. How strange it is because of the the connection to ancient Rome. And you know, when you described him seeing the Roman world superimposed on this one, it reminded me of an experience I had indirectly when I was working in New York in the late 70s as an advertising man. I was very interested in the city, and I used to read a lot about it and look at old pictures of the city, not knowing that this would gradually draw me into something different from what a world we're different from what we normally see. And one day, some of the people who were at the agency came back from lunch saying that they had seen a pyramid double exposed over the public library that they could see while they were walking across the street coming back from a sandwich shop.
So other people saw this?
Yeah, some of the secretaries and one of the other account executives did.
Wow.
And, of course, I knew immediately what it was. They were seeing the wall of the Croton Reservoir that had been there up until the library was built in the late 19th century. They were seeing backwards in time. The past intercut somehow with the present. And
left an impression on the objects that replaced it.
And I'm wondering if he wasn't sort of seeing the same thing on that day when he could see the Roman world superimposed on the physical world, on the present world. It's a very interesting. Did he ever go to Rome?
I don't think so. He didn't travel much.
Yeah. Didn't
as far
need to.
as I know, he went to Vancouver in British Columbia, and he went to Metz, France. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong.
Why did he go to Metz?
He was invited to be guest of honor at a convention. I think it was 76 or 7.
76 or 77, I see.
Yeah.
So, and he went in particular to Metz because he had been invited there.
Yes, and they paid his way. He never had much money until shortly before he died.
Yeah, that's a shame. These struggles, I've been in the same struggle. People always think, oh, Whitley must be really rich, but unfortunately, they don't know what a writer's life is like. They have no idea what we go
yes.
through.
I have a couple novels on Amazon, and
Oh, you do?
yeah.
Oh, I wish you'd told me that before we started. I would have certainly promoted them. Well, tell us a little bit about them, please.
Well, there's my science fiction novel. It's called Origins because that's the English word for Genesis. It will be a trilogy, and part 1 is basically about a previous creation before Adam and Eve, and I wanted to get into the minds of people who lived through what Velikovsky described in Worlds in Collision.
Oh, wow. Well, as we talk, I'm going to Amazon.com, and I'm looking at Origins Part 1, Thor's Hammer by Tessa K. Dick.
B.
B. Dick, I'm sorry, Philip K. Dick, Tessa B. Dick, okay.
Yeah.
Paperback, out in paperback last February. It has 5 1/4 out of a possible 6 stars. So obviously some people have really liked this.
I was amazed. I was really afraid to release it because people might hate it.
Well, I have to read it. I'm going to buy it right now.
Oh, cool.
Right now while we're on the air.
Yeah, well, I'm making about $20 a month on it.
I know, it's horrible.
Yeah, and I've written some other books under my maiden name, but they are not science fiction. I had to make Dad proud of me.
Do you want to talk about them?
Well,
You don't have to. Don't worry.
let's just focus on Origins for now, because it's really the one it's my favorite of the moment.
Well, folks, go to Amazon.com and take a look at Tessa Dick's Origins. See what you think. Part 1, Thor's Hammer, of a trilogy to be. Tessa Dick, it has been a real pleasure to talk to you about your life and your life with Philip K. Dick and Philip K. Dick himself. This is Whitley Strieber for Dreamland, and thank you so much for listening.